Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the McKinney. This is their part number, 76305, Hinge Pin Stop for the MacPro MP79 and the MPB79. This is a hinge pin doorstop intended just for those more economy grade hinges, the MP79 and the MPB79. Okay, so the way I see it is this is McKinney saying just give the client what they want. And what they want is the ability to have a hinge pin doorstop on a commercial grade door, meaning a door that is so substantial enough as to require a full size, 4.5 inch and 0.134 size hinge. And hinge pin doorstops, I think, are, their area of commonality is going to be a residential application. You're going to see them in homes pretty frequently. And they're used in homes, residential applications, but they're also seen in commercial applications where I know that customers have taken other hinge pin doorstops and have modified them when required to fit even on heavyweight 4.5 inch hinges. And they're used, frankly, because they're easy, they're inexpensive, they're easy, they don't take really much work to install, meaning they're less work than other things. And I think they're built or used in applications where they're built into a system when the person installing them is really not concerned about, in my opinion, the long-term health of the door and the opening. What I mean is, I don't believe that a hinge pin doorstop is the best ever way to go, in the sense that you have a lot of leverage that is moving on the door and moving. This represents how it's being pushed by the door. A lot of momentum, a lot of mass that's going to move this against whatever it's going to hit, which will be, the door moving the hinge pin stop, and then this will make contact with the frame or the casing. And I've seen instances where the door is pushed so far where the face of the door has literally cratered or collapsed in, a hollow core door. Or I've seen it where there's been so much force put on it where the doors continue to push and the point of contact on the casing itself has made the casing kind of split out this way. Now, those are worst case scenarios, and in almost all scenarios, you never have such a problem, permanent damage to a door or a frame. And these are in the home that I live in, and they were installed by the person who built the house. I've never gone back to change them. But those applications are also very adult used. There's really no chance of any sort of aggressive or the type of behavior that's going to cause damage. It's really just to prevent the door from making contact, because it will stop, but you want to have the very slightest of force pushing against that. So having said the negatives, the positives are that they're very convenient to use in applications that you could otherwise have a stop, but the option is either very impractical, usually expensive, very difficult to install by someone who's never installed something before. And what I'm talking about is an overhead stop, either concealed or surface mount. There's a slide track design that gets installed at the top or in the top of the door and frame and header. And those would always work. It's just, when you're taking something that's just a few dollars and making it a project that could cost a couple $100, people are going to use hinge pin doorstops all the time. What McKinney's done with this is they've basically designed one that is intended for use on a full-size hinge, not one that's been perverted to be used on a full-size hinge. And what is indeed smart about their design is that they're giving you a hinge pin as well. The reason they're giving you the hinge pin is when you take a competitor's hinge pin stop and install it into that standard frame, you're using the same hinge pin. Well, that same hinge pin did not allow for the thickness of the hinge pin stop here. So the hinge pin that they give you is longer so that it does continue to seat all the way down into the knuckles of the hinge, so that it comes all the way down and through to the bottom of the hinge assembly, making sure that all the joints of the hinges are still intact and they're still held together. So again, it's that situation where McKinney said, just give the client what they want. They want to put these on 4.5 ball bearing hinges. Great, here you go. We'll even give you a better idea with the hinge pin. Okay, and as a result, this would really be appropriate for only those applications. Now, you could certainly install this onto a residential application, but the ID of that bushing there is not really intended for a smaller hinge pin, a residential hinge pin. Let's take some dimensions. The diameter of the pin is 0.312, so it's 5/16. You know, it's going to be far larger than any residential, far thicker than any residential hinge. Now this length of the pin itself, about 4 5/16 or so. Okay. No, nope. How are we doing that? Let's see. Yeah, about 4 3/8, 4 5/16. A normal hinge will be 4.5 inch. That's from the underside of the head, so that's going to make basically penetration all the way down and through, with the exception of probably the area where there's a small button tip that's underneath there that has a hole in it. So they're just short of that. So this runs the full length. That would certainly be advantageous. Adjusting this hinge is done by means of this nut and that screw. You'd be able to open that up to be able to reduce that opening down quite far. Right now, if we're kind of just, you know, judging as to how far that would go, it's really this angle here that we're talking about. So this is going to be every bit of 110 degrees of open. What's going to happen is the door, when it's pushed open, will continue. I'll hold my finger here to represent the frame. When the door gets pushed open, the door will push until it hits the side of the frame. So, you know, my very unscientific method, probably about 110 degree would be its maximum, and probably will go down to maybe 75 degree. Let's get a screwdriver and take a look at that. Okay, so we're just going to loosen that screw that's there and get that adjusted. You don't have to remove it, just loosen it, because what will happen is, it was just probably one turn too much. Just going to put that back together. Okay, just loosening it. And all that's going to happen is we're just going to take these plates and we're just going to move them. Okay. And they'll lock together there. And we'll just hand tighten that back together. Now, our same little project. Sorry, I put it back together the exact way we had it. There we go. Now it's at its dimension to be most restrictive. Now our same little test here, when that door gets pushed open, you know, it'll be open much less than otherwise. Okay, so certainly well past 90, down to probably about 75 degree or so. So should you really never have a need for the door to go to 90 degree, you could certainly do that. But I would think you're probably going to have the second setting, you know, somewhere in the 90 degree range is going to be pretty appropriate for that sort of application. Okay. Why would you need a hinge pin door stop? Well, probably an application where you don't have room to get a baseboard stop installed or a floor stop. A very common application is a powder room, a very small powder room, where you may have a 2'8" door, and that door opens up into the bathroom, and it gets to about 85 degree before it literally will hit the commode. A sink over here, very little room inside of the area. No place to put a floor stop because the door is only getting to 80 degree before it hits a commode. So a hinge pin door stop. You know, if you can't use an overhead concealed or surface mounted overhead stop, the hinge pin door stop at least will assist in a fatal crashing of the door into the toilet. So that would be my recommendation. There are two models of this from McKinney, and it's just based on the hinge that you're using from them, either their standard commercial hinge or their import or lower end line, the MacPro hinges. So let's switch to the screen view and take a closer look at the supporting documentation. Okay, so here's the item that we are indeed here looking at. McKinney 76305 Hinge Pin Stop. They're saying it's for the MacPro MP, which is a plain bearing standard weight hinge and a ball bearing standard weight hinge. Happens to be in a satin chrome finish. I don't know what other finishes they make in this, but we'll take a closer look. That other model that I mentioned was the 76306, and that's for the plain bearing or the basically the ball bearing version of the 2714. That's their garden variety, standard hinge. There's clearly a design difference between the MacPro and the TA2714, which is why they need a different hinge pin stop. Hinge pin stop protects against damage to doors and walls. Hinge pin runs the full length of the hinge to keep it firmly seated and preserves the strength of the hinge. Recommended for high use or high impact doors with those MacPro hinges. Satin chrome, sold as each. Okay, so let's take a look at the links down below. There might be some duplication here. This link, first of all, will take you to the other item. So we'll skip over that. Let's go to catalog page. So literally a cut sheet, or what some call a tear sheet. McKinney hinge pin stop for 4.5 inch. Exceptional protection against damage to walls, doors, high use, high impact openings. The hinge pin runs the full length to keep the hinge firmly seated when in use, while also reliably preserving the strength of the hinge. Two versions for the two different hinges that you'll use them on. Yeah, I mean, I can, because the TA or the T2714 and the MacPro hinge, they're going to be different dimensional properties. Obviously, something must change, and it may have something to do with the pin that's in there. So that's the first link. The second is the cut sheet. Okay, so this is coming out of their full line catalog, certainly, and gives a reference down here, a duplicate of what we've already discussed. And then there's the catalog. Yeah, okay, so this is the manufacturer's full line catalog, not necessarily germane to what we're talking about, except that, yeah, not even having success in the hinge pin stop coming in up. 763. Okay, so it's the full line catalog. If you're interested in all things McKinney related in terms of hanging hardware, that would be a great document for you to review. We won't touch on that here. There is this stock image that is here. Okay, there is the link below here to the manufacturer's page, where you can pull up not only all the McKinney products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the most current product catalog. Other encyclopedic documents are kept here as well, and marketing documents from McKinney and Assa Abloy in general. So handy information here, including prior versions of the catalog. Speaking of prior versions of the catalog, if you wanted to see what McKinney was doing in 1929, well, there's a catalog from 1929. The name McKinney was also not only synonymous with these iron-forged pieces of hardware that we see here, and if you're in certain parts of, the East Coast, where, settling and development is much older than it may be, and is most certainly older than in other parts of the United States, in North Carolina, you're going to see homes that have a lot of this type of hardware. And I say that because I've been there and have seen it. So this is what they were doing in 1929, forged hardware. You can still buy some of this material, certainly not from McKinney, but there is a company called Acorn that does manufacture material that is, you could erase 9 decades of difference between the two catalogs, and it's all quite similar. So that's what they were doing 90 years ago. Very interesting. So that's a fun trip back in time, so to speak. McKinney was also known at some point in the 80s, I'm not sure when, probably the second half of the 80s and very early 90s, as Division 10 hardware, which is bathroom equipment, toilet paper dispensers, and things of that nature you would find from McKinney. And they've long since discontinued that, supplying that material. But occasionally someone will call and say they need a spindle for a McKinney toilet tissue dispenser. Because we're fresh out of time machines, we can usually not help clients when they have such equipment that was sunsetted so many years ago. Okay, let's wrap up this video on camera. So notwithstanding my initial dour, description of hinge pin door stops, they are very, very common. We would have clients building homes, 3 flats, tracts of homes, and say, okay, I need 200 hinge pin door stops, etc., etc. Where are you going to use those? Well, I'm going to use those in those areas where I don't have a wall that the door is going to stop against, that I don't want it to continue to go past a certain area, things of that nature. And again, it's very likely just McKinney giving people what they want because they're using them anyway, and why wouldn't they? I did mention other finishes, and let's see if I can tell you quickly if it's made in any other finish. It probably is in at least one other finish, and my guess would be like a oil rub bronze. No, it's definitely not. It's made in satin chrome only, both the 05 and the 06 version. Satin chrome only would be the finish. So you can have any color you want as long as it's satin chrome. Okay, there you go. Now, these tips, as far as I know, these are not replaceable in the sense of they're not available. I will update the product description with that information, whether or not these tips are available separately for purchase. They do fatigue and fail with time. I do have clients that will call and say, I need those hinge pin tips. What colors are they available in? Well, usually in a major competitor to McKinney, it would be white or even black, although not by that major competitor. Just white. And client says, well, I need cream. Okay, they never made it in cream. That hinge pin stop's a decade old, and exposure to the environment has literally changed the chemical properties of the hinge pin stop where it's changed color. But they do flatten, they do dry out, so to speak, and they fail to become, useful or effective when they're, compressed so much that they no longer spring back. And they're really hard in the sense that they're not cushioning the door against the frame at all via the hinge pin stop. Okay, if you have any questions on the McKinney 76305 hinge pin stop or any other McKinney product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. If you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please click subscribe as well, and even share the video with someone that you know. And if you have any questions for a future video, please send them our way and we will make every attempt to oblige. And thank you very much.